In this video, we're going to run through really quickly how to use GitHub Copilot to improve your coding. In particular, we're going to be using Visual Studio Code, look at all the different ways in which it integrates into that interface. We will also walk through some of the key use cases that not only helps you write code faster, but also write better code by refactoring, and also helping you to understand other people's code, and also do better documentation of your own code. And for the past few months, I've been too busy to play around with it, which is a total oxymoron in retrospect, because as you can see from the research and what everyone else is saying about it, it is essentially proven that it can improve not only the speed of your coding, your satisfaction of when you're doing coding, but you can actually learn from the Copilot as well by asking it to refactor your code and to see how you could have written it better. So there's really no excuse for not getting it set up in your IDE. And if you haven't done it already, you really should do it now. So let's move on to here. So let's just go through, there's lots of tutorials which I'll link to in the description below on how to set it up. And I've just described the steps here. Number one is that you need to enable Copilot on github.com in your profile, pay for the subscription. Secondly, you need to go to your IDE, and in this case, we're going to be using VS Code. You need to install two extensions, the GitHub Copilot extension and the GitHub Copilot chat extension. The third piece is you'll need to sign into GitHub using that extension while you're on VS Code, so those two things are talking to each other, and then restart VS Code. And then finally, there's a little spot in the bottom right-hand corner where you can check that GitHub Copilot is active and working. So once you've done all that, now that you have your extensions and your GitHub subscription all set up, you might be wondering what are the ways in which the Copilot tool would be integrated into the VS Code IDE that you're so familiar with. Well, I found it a little bit confusing at the beginning, so I drew this tree diagram just to make it clear all the different ways and places where you can interact with it. So you've got your usual VS environment. One of the easiest things you can do is either click on a button or click on Ctrl-Command-I to pull up a separate pane that includes a chat view. And so this is a separate panel. It looks a little bit like ChatGPT. It's got some additional functions that enable you to reference your workspace, enables you to declare an intent using smart actions so it can be more accurate in terms of interpreting what you want it to do. The second one is more integrated into the actual code that you're typing. So normally this stuff appears just automatically unless you switched it off. So as you're typing, either describing using comments what you want a particular function to do, or just typing the code directly yourself, you'll see some gray ghost text appear in front of you. And if it is in fact what you wanted to type, you can just click on Tab to accept the whole thing. You can also see more options by clicking on Option right bracket. You can see the next suggestion, toggle through all the different suggestions, left bracket to go back. And if you wanted to see all the suggestions that it has opened up in a separate panel, you can click on Command Enter to see everything. And then from there, decide what you want to put into your code. Or if it all looks bad, you can dismiss all by clicking on Escape. And as you're typing, you will also see this little icon called a Smart Action Sparkle. And this sparkle is different from the light bulb in the sense that it is specific to GitHub Copilot. And it appears when Copilot thinks that there are some suggestions for fixing errors, completing the code, or other enhancements. So all you have to do is to click on it, and then there'll be a little menu that turns up, and you can decide what you want to do from there. Finally, there's this thing called an inline chat. It's a text box that you can type into, just like the chat view, but instead of taking up a whole panel, it just takes up a small amount of space right in line with where your cursor is in the line of your code. And you can have that appear by clicking on Command-I, Or if you wanted to pull up something called a quick chat, which appears at the top of your screen, you can click Command Shift I. Right, so now that we know roughly where Copilot's going to be showing up on our screen, we can have a look at some of the key use cases that can help us improve productivity. And there are tons and tons of different use cases, but these are just some of the ones that I've found useful. I've categorized them into 3 main buckets. The first one is creating things. So for example, if you are creating a whole new project, you can ask Copilot to create the file directory for you, create the workspace, initialize the files with some template code, saving you a bit of work at the beginning. You can also, based on the functions that you've written, ask Copilot to write the corresponding unit tests and place it into a separate test file. And you can also, within the line of your code, using comments, just describe what you want the function to do, and then Copilot can just create that function for you. We'll see all of this in action in a second. The second bucket is basically improving on existing code. So you can highlight some of your existing code and ask Copilot to write it in a better way and refactor it. And I actually find this really useful for learning how I can be coding better. It can fix bugs. And also, if you've got a ton of code that you haven't really bothered to document very well, you can just highlight that entire code and then ask it to add the documentation, and then it will add all of those comments in line into the file. And finally, without generating code, it can also help you to understand, for example, someone else's code. You can highlight it and ask it to explain to you what it does, or you can just ask general questions about coding as you would do in something like a general chat GPT. So let's move on over to VS Code right now and see all of this stuff in action. All right, so we're in VS Code right now. And if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see this little GitHub icon here. If you click on it, you'll be able to see the status of your GitHub Copilot integration. And so it's looking ready. If you, for this particular code, you don't want to use it, you can disable it right here. But we do want to use it. So here, this is the chat view interface. That's the most similar to ChatGPT. So let's say now we want to start a new project and we want it to help us initialize some files. We're going to do new. These smart actions essentially helps to give the Copilot more context about your intent. So whatever you type next can be interpreted in the context of you wanting to start a new project. So I'll say something like, I would like to start a new Python project that can be executed from command line. Please help to initialize the files. So it's working on that. So here's a proposed directory structure. And here's a button for me to create the actual workspace. So let's press on that. It's going to ask me where I want to save it. So let's just save it here. And now you can see it's creating those files for me. Amazing. Now we're in this new workspace. So let's click into the code. So you'll see that in the main.py, they've created like a hello world function here. And they've also created a unit test file with some placeholder code here, a README markdown file, requirements.txt, and setup.py. Cool, so let's go into main. A function that takes 2 integers as input and returns their average. And you can see this gray code is the ghost text. So it's recommendations. So if I wanted to accept this, then I just press tab, and there we go, it's already written for me. But let's say I didn't want to just take the code recommended. I wanted to see what options I have. I can toggle through the options by clicking on option right bracket, left bracket, I will go back. So it looks like there are only 2 options. If we wanted to see all the options available, we can do Control Return. And it pulls up a separate panel here that shows me all of the suggestions that it has. So suggestion is like this, suggestion 2. Oh, so it's got tons of different suggestions. Okay, let's go with this. Okay, so now we might want to update the test file with the unit test for this function. In test main.py, let's call up an inline chat box with command I. So I can ask Copilot to generate code. So maybe we can say, please add a unit test that reflects the changes made in main.py. Cool. So it's created a unit test function for me. Okay, here I've got a whole bunch of code that corresponds to a great textbook about reinforcement learning, and it's got all of the examples from that textbook implemented here as Python code. And so there's a lot of code here written by someone else, and we can see how we can use Copilot to help us navigate this. The one in chapter 1 is called tic-tac-toe. So one of the first things that we can do is call up chat is to ask it about the workspace. So here we don't want new, just want to ask about the workspace. Find me the code that relates to multi-arm bandits. This is a type of reinforcement learning problem. So it's searching through all of those different files to help me find the right part. Yeah, so it's found the code for me here. There we go. So that's one of the things it can do. Let's go back to this file. So let's say we're kind of looking through this, and here's a state class, and then inside the state class is this hash function. Let's say we didn't really understand what it's doing. We can highlight it and right click, go to Copilot and say explain this. So this Python code defines a method named hash within a class. The purpose of this method is to generate a unique identifier for an instance of the class. And the hash value based on the data contained in the instance. And so it goes on to just explain in natural language the concept of this function. Okay, let's click on this. Can you refactor this code to make it more Pythonic? If you click on this, then you can see what it's deleted and what it's adding. So it's basically replaced this stuff with a single line. So let's accept this. There we go. It's used a generator to make our code somewhat more Pythonic. And what else can we do? Let's say we don't think this code, this whole file has been documented very well. And let's go to Copilot and say generate docs. So you can see the file getting longer and longer. It's adding a lot of So here you can see all of the documentation that it's added in line here. Like represents a player in a tic-tac-toe game, attributes, methods. So it really makes all the code a lot more readable. Let's try something. See if it understands how all of this code works. Explain all of it. Okay, so that didn't work. No user message, only as a system message. Can you explain the code in... So here you can choose from the... You can make a reference to a file. It's implementing a game of tic-tac-toe with an AI player that uses reinforcement learning to improve its gameplay over time. Here's a breakdown of its key components. Judger, this player represents an AI player. These are the temporal difference, very good. Maybe I can ask, what is the purpose of the variable called step size? Provide the code snippet where step size is used. Let's see. So let's just copy and paste this. In the context of this player class, step size is a parameter that controls the rate at which the player's estimations are updated. Really good. So there we go. Super useful. Go install it.